Welcome to Inside the Vault with SWP. Join Mark Yaxley as we explore the latest news, reports, and some bullion basics for investors old and new. Let's get to it.
Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome back to our first Inside the Vault podcast of 2024. Happy to have you with us as we dive into the world of precious metals and precious metals investing with some of the brightest minds in the space. If you've joined us before, thank you for your support. If you're a new listener, welcome to the show. You can find all of our previous episodes on the SWP YouTube channel, along with our video series by the same name, hosted by SWP CEO Mark Yaxley. Inside the Vault is the most viewed channel about precious metals investing on the web, full of industry expertise and best practices for novice and expert investors alike. While you're there, please make sure to like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our content. We're also incredibly excited to expand Inside the Vault into podcast form through ANCAP Radio. So thank you very much to ANCAP for hosting us. I'm your host, Jeremy Varlow, excited to be with you again today. We've got a great show in store once again. We have a very special repeat guest with us today. Bob Moriarty joins us very shortly. In the meantime, though, Mark Yaxley is back with his weekly market update. Let's turn it over to Mark and see what he's been watching.
Thanks, Jeremy, and Happy New Year. Really excited to have Bob back with us. Last episode was pretty fiery, so looking forward to seeing what Bob has to say today. In market news for gold this past week, geopolitical risks continue to escalate as the U.S. becomes more and more involved in the conflict in the Middle East. In addition to dealing with Hamas, Israel and its Western allies are engaging daily with the Houthi rebels in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Global leaders are convening in the Middle East in an apparent attempt, and I emphasize apparent attempt, to de-escalate the situation. December's inflation numbers exceeded expectations, coming in at 3.4% compared to the anticipated 3.2% year over year. This has reignited discussions about when the Fed might initiate interest rate cuts. The likelihood of a rate cut in March has diminished as a result of the higher than expected December numbers. Despite gold's impressive 13% increase in 2023, a very good year and the leading commodity, it should be noted, gold ETFs experienced net outflows for the year. European ETF outflows surpassed North America inflows and those of other regions, including Asia. It's worth noting that flows of ETFs often reflect short-term opinions and the preferences of investors who may not be particularly loyal to precious metals long-term. And closing on a positive note, gold achieved all-time highs priced in 9 out of 10 major currencies in 2023, with the Swiss franc being the sole exception.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Mark. I want to jump right in here and bring Bob up on stage. As I mentioned, he is back by popular demand. Bob Moriarty is an author of both finance and investing guides, as well as chronicles of his own experiences as a U.S. Marine pilot in Vietnam. Bob is also the founder of 321gold.com and 321energy.com, which feature articles and updates on global events affecting both sectors. Bob, welcome back to the show.
Well, I would love to say I appreciate it, but when you hear what I have to say, you may not appreciate it.
Well, and that's part of the reason we wanted to bring you back. Your last show with us was one of our most viewed podcasts to date. And we know that, as Mark said, you've got some fiery opinions. So, it's always, really, really great to have you back on and to follow up on what we spoke of last time. I want to start first. Let's talk about metals before we get into kind of the more geopolitical and macroeconomic stuff. Let's start with the metals and resource sector. Since we last spoke, gold achieved a new all-time high around $2,180. Right now we're trading at $2,030. Silver has bounced around a little bit in that time, has yet to really make a big break in either direction. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on the current prices, what's happened over the past 4 to 6 weeks, and what you're looking at, what kind of catalyst we could have for our next big move in the precious metals prices.
The metals are very confusing now. you would think that if gold hits an all-time high, and gold had a good year last year, that the ETFs and the gold shares would follow. And that absolutely has not been the case. The financial system in general is in a lot of chaos. And frankly, I think that people don't know what to invest in now. However, given the fact that compared to the stock market, compared to commodities in general, and compared to the price of gold, gold shares are the cheapest they've ever been. And my belief, it's just my opinion, is that one of these days, very soon, something's going to happen that's going to light a fire under gold shares.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, from the conversations that I have, a lot of people are looking at kind of the interest rate decision. That was probably cause for, a good part of that momentum leading to that all-time high in early December. Even though Chairman Powell has cautioned against, getting ahead of ourselves when it comes to interest rate cuts, the market still, wanted to price this in. Many forecasters are still predicting those rate cuts later in the year. Wanted to know what your thoughts were, when we might expect to hear more concrete decision on interest rates.
I literally don't know enough about that. And I have no opinion either way. I'm not impressed with the Fed. And frankly, I think everything the Fed does ends up being wrong. So it doesn't make any difference whether I think interest rates are going to go up or interest rates are going to go down. I will say, and we'll get into this with the geopolitics, the world is so dangerous now that interest rates and inflation are almost bound to go higher, potentially much higher.
Really? So you're thinking, you think instead of a cut, we could actually be getting a hike?
Yes.
Interesting. Well, let's hope not. Fingers crossed. Let's kind of get into those macroeconomic situations before we talk about the geopolitical stuff. Last time you were on, you mentioned you've been warning about a potentially impending financial crash for some time now. And when we last spoke, you specifically singled out the derivatives market as being one of those catalysts for this collapse. And I watched our last conversation over again, and I wanted to kind of prod at that a little bit. Obviously, 2008, we saw the derivatives market cause, that financial crisis. Just for our audience that might not be familiar with derivatives, and I know you said it as well, as they are incredibly complex instruments that are deliberately made difficult to understand. Maybe you can provide just a simple example of, a derivative and what that means.
Okay, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that because it is confusing. If you have a 100-ounce bar of gold in your hand, that is not a derivative. If you go out on the commodities exchange and sell a put or a call on that 100 ounces of gold, that is a derivative. A derivative is a financial instrument that derives its value from another financial instrument. And I'll point something out. I'll show you why derivatives are so dangerous. First of all, nobody knows how many are out there. And I've heard numbers of 2 or 3 quadrillion. And frankly, I don't believe them. However, as measured by the BIS, and you can go to the BIS website and you can download the information, they're somewhere around $600 or $700 trillion. And I'll show you why it's so dangerous. The 2/3 of the listed derivatives that we know exist are related to interest rates. And the danger of derivatives is not the volume of change, it's the rate of change. And we've had the greatest change in interest rates in 150 years in the shortest period of time, which means somebody was taking a giant hit on $400-500 trillion worth of derivatives. And we cheer the fact that interest rates have gone down. I can't give you an exact quote, but the 10-year and the 30-year got up to above 5%, and they're down substantially now. But the key to derivatives is it's a zero-sum game. You've got one winner and one loser, okay? So what happens when interest rates shoot higher? One side gets creamed. And that's why we had so many bank failures early in the year. But when interest rates go down at a rapid rate, exactly the same thing happens. So you could think of it as a loose cannon on a sailing vessel. The cannon is running from one side to the other side to the other side, and every time it does that, it puts a hole in it. Derivatives will eventually be blamed for the demise of the Western debt-based financial system. However, they're just part of the picture. They're just the most dangerous part.
So then, this is, me asking the question here, as I'm trying to understand this, how do the complexities in that derivatives market, like what is the last, kind of domino that gets pushed over that sets everything off? Like how does that start?
We don't know. Okay.
Yeah, I was afraid you might say that.
Yeah, we're going to find out. But let's pretend you're on a ski holiday out in Colorado, and all of a sudden there's an avalanche warning. How many snowflakes does it take to start an avalanche?
Sure.
No, it's a serious question.
I mean, it could be just the smallest amount that sets off, the avalanche.
One.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, try to predict which snowflake sets off the avalanche. That's hard to do. But predicting avalanches is something that we could do. And predicting a snowflake will start it off. We don't know what's going to take derivatives down. In June of 2007, I was on a trip with about 15 or 20 other financial guys, and we were in Singapore, and somebody had chartered a big jet and was flying us around Philippines and Vietnam and Singapore and Indonesia and Malaysia, and we were looking at different mining projects. So somebody took us out to a real nice restaurant in Singapore. And of course, we had some wine. We may have had a lot of wine. And of course, we're all half tipsy and stupid. And the guy who is in charge of derivatives from Quarry Bank in Australia was sitting next to me. And the word came out that these 3 hedge funds in the United States had collapsed. Bear Stearns. And everybody's going, oh my God, that's terrible. And I turned to the guy who was in charge of derivatives, and I said, you guys just make that shit up, don't you? And he smiled. And he said, well, yeah. And I said, and you don't understand it any more than I do. And he said, well, yeah. And the strange thing is, of course, what the banks were doing was betting on the U.S. government bailing out the banking system. And that's exactly what happened. It was a good bet on their part. And the United States was bailing out banks all over Europe. It was absolutely incredible. And it was all based on I think you could call it fraud. So much of derivatives is fraud. Let me give you an example. you can actually speculate on the temperature in Houston on July 1st of any given year.
Mm-hmm.
So you got one guy saying it'll be above 90 degrees, and he's betting on it being above 90 degrees. You got the other guy betting that it's going to be below 90 degrees. And what people were doing was they were marking to theory, okay? They run their projections through half a dozen computer programs, and they would select the computer program that gave them the best results. Now they were getting 2% 20. Okay, they get 2% for running a derivative, and they got 20% of the profit. So what was happening was both sides were claiming a profit and then scraping 20% off the top. And I hate to say it, and everybody hates me talking about Bitcoin. The same thing's true in Bitcoin. I mean, there's so much fraud in Bitcoin. It's not a market that I have ever been tempted to be involved in, because I don't see any practical use for it in the first place. There's 10,000 different Bitcoins, and that can't possibly work. And there's so much fraud. Why would you invest in something that's that much fraud? But derivatives in general, okay, same thing, fraud.
I've got a Bitcoin question for you later in the show. We'll get to that. We'll get to that very shortly. I wanted to
hang on. I can answer it right now.
Go ahead.
The answer is no.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate all that. I'm not sure if I've learned anything more about derivatives to this point, despite your best efforts. But yeah, it's quite designed that way. Let's talk about, we mentioned China last time we spoke. You had some, opinions about China. I wanted to get your thoughts on a few other countries that we're watching, namely Japan, Argentina, and Germany. Obviously, the Japanese yen has had a very tough 2023. Argentina inflation is up over 200%. And then Germany, which is actually one that you pointed out earlier, had the worst performing economy in the world in 2023. What are the implications for the global economy when, these major countries are struggling?
Again, and that's a really good question. I wrote a book about war in 2016. And on the last page, I talked about predicting we were going to have our first worldwide global revolution. And here's the key. Germany, Australia, Argentina, China, Japan, they're all related, okay? It's all a function of the debt-based financial system. People all over the world are waking up and saying, hey, wait a minute, the debt-based system doesn't work. All it's doing is transferring the wealth into the hands of the 1/10 of 1%, okay? I've said it a dozen times in 50 different interviews. The conflict between BRICS and the West has to do with the conflict between the debt-based system and a resource-based system of the East and the South. Japan is going through some major throes. Taiwan has just elected the most anti-Chinese candidate. However, his party lost control of their house. So it's kind of like this. On one side, they gained a lot of power. On the other side, they lost a lot of power. The new prime minister of Argentina, of course, is trying to make major changes in a short period of time. And what I'm going to get into, and I sent you the list. I had written down, let me think here. I'd written down 19 different things that we should cover. We're going to have more chaos in the next 6 months to a year than we've ever had in history. China has made it clear that Taiwan is part of China. From a legal point of view and a historical point of view, Taiwan is part of China. Biden has actually come out and said, yes, we recognize Taiwan as part of China. However, the neocons, okay, are saying, no, we need to go to war. Now, let me point something out. One of the nice things about having spent 20 months in combat is that you soon learn when you had your ass kicked. And the United States went into Afghanistan, spent $2.3 trillion, was there for 20 years. Took them 20 years to figure out they were getting their ass kicked. Now then, what was the occupation of the average Taliban? What did he do for a living?
I haven't the slightest clue.
No, you do. You know.
I guess farmer.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Goat herder.
Goat herder.
Okay. Or farmer. Or sheep herder. Okay. They all work. Now that if you walk into a bar and it's filled with goat herders and you start running your mouth and get your ass kicked, do not go next door to the biker bar and start running your mouth, okay? Because when the goat herders kick your ass, they're trying to tell you something. When the bikers start listening to your nonsense, okay, you know you're in trouble. And strange enough, we go from Vietnam, which was a loss for the United States, to Iraq, which was a loss for the United States, to Afghanistan, which was a loss for the United States. So what did the neocons do? They went to the Rand Corporation. They paid them millions of dollars to come up with a plan in 2019 to destroy Russia. Now, Russia has the most powerful military in the world now. Talking about Germany, we got to address this because it's so important. Who blew up the pipeline?
Is that a rhetorical question or?
No, not at all. Who threatened to blow up the pipeline?
I mean, I had seen that it was the U.S. on a number of occasions.
Biden said he was going to take it down. Victoria Nuland said he was going to take it down. A $30 billion pipeline gets blown up, and you know the U.S. military was behind it. How many pipes were there?
I don't know.
4.
Yeah.
Okay. How many got blown up?
It was 1, wasn't it?
3.
3.
Okay. Now then, when you have the most expensive military in the entire world, and you've got drag queen contests to try to get people to enlist, if you try to blow up 4 pipelines, how many can you blow up?
4?
3. Because you're incompetent, because you're worried about woke nonsense. Now, here's what happened. And I wrote a piece in March of 2022, and I said that the sanctions against Russia were going to destroy the EU, we're going to destroy the euro, and destroy the dollar, and destroy the United States, but they weren't going to destroy Russia. The attack on the pipeline was the single biggest act of financial terrorism in history. And Germany let them do it. And there are people starving in Germany today, and there are people freezing in Germany today because Schultz let the United States blow up the pipeline that was supplying cheap natural gas to Germany.
Right.
69% of the companies in Germany have had to outsource production to other countries or have had to shut down. 50,000 German companies have gone bankrupt. That was an entirely self-inflicted injury on the part of Germany. I'll be blunt. I have no idea of why Europe is being so stupid. They are bringing in not tens of millions. They're bringing in millions of illegal immigrants. They're paying their way. And these people have no intention whatsoever, okay, of becoming part of Germany or part of Sweden or part of Denmark or part of France, okay? They want the free ride. Since 9/11, the US and Israel have created 37 million refugees, and they're all over Europe, and now they're all over the United States too. And that cannot be a good thing. That has to be a bad thing. So the world in general is in a state of total chaos because they're being so stupid. Now, frankly, I would like to see France do what it's in France's interest. I'd like to see Germany do what it's Germany's interest. I'd like to see China do what it's Chinese interest. I'd like to see the Russians do what's in Russian interest. And they're not doing that, okay? What they're doing is playing lapdog to NATO and to the United States. And that's so insane. Did you happen to follow what what Blinken said about the effects of the war in Ukraine? Okay. He said something in the last 10 days that was so awe-inspiring, we should memorize it. He was talking about the effects of the Ukraine war. What did he say?
Did he say it was a success at low cost to the United States?
No. He said it was a win-win for the United States.
Win-win. That's
jobs. I mean, the strange thing is you got it. Okay, you didn't hit the bullseye, but you were really close to the bullseye. Somewhere between 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers and 1 million Ukrainian soldiers have been killed. Now, I have my own opinion about the value of the war. However, I don't give a damn if they're Muslims. I don't give a damn if they're Jews. I don't give a damn if they're Ukrainians. I don't give a damn if they're Russians. 1 million people dying for nothing, okay, is a waste. And one of the things that I would do, and I've never heard anybody suggest this, but I'm going to suggest it. Because I was in the military, of course, I tend to think, well, you know, I'm going to look at it from a military point of view. If you want to understand war, all you have to do is go to a military cemetery and walk around for an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to see? Joe Blow, age 19, died June 1944. Okay, Bill Smith, age 22. Died Vietnam, 1968. And if you ask yourself, what did these people die for?
Right.
What's the answer?
For freedom?
Look, you think I was fighting for freedom in Vietnam? Bullshit.
Right.
I was fighting for DuPont. I was fighting for Convair. Okay. I was fighting for Grumman Aircraft. I wasn't fighting for freedom. How do you fight for freedom? By taking somebody else's freedom away? I mean, that's like going to Afghanistan. Hell, we were fighting for poppies in Afghanistan.
Right.
That if people go to war and they die shooting at somebody who's not their enemy, and that's all wars are about, they died for nothing. Okay, there is nothing good that comes out of war. And if you keep getting your ass kicked in war, it would be a real good idea to stop going to war.
Right. Right.
And we refuse to do that categorically. One of the things that I say in the book, and it's very important to understand this, nobody wins any war. The only thing that happens is one side loses more than the other side. But saying you win a war is like walking into that biker bar, running your mouth, getting your teeth knocked out, okay, but kicking the guy in the leg and busting his leg. What did you win, okay? 3 teeth knocked out? It's not a big.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. I just actually watched a documentary on World War II on Netflix the other day, and that was my exact thought as well. It was like, you know, for the millions and millions of people who died, like what was it for? I want to pivot. I know that you have some thoughts on this as well. Obviously, 2024, we're entering an election year. Brings about its own bit of uncertainty. Here we go. Perfect. That's the reaction I thought I might have out of you. What do you think for the U.S. elections this year? What are your thoughts and how that affects the markets?
I just gave it to you.
Fair enough.
I can't say how it's going to affect the markets. I do want to go down our list because there's so many things. There's so many black swans that are going to affect the markets. I mean, predicting this market, anybody who believes they can predict this market is an idiot. But my reaction to the 2024 election is, okay, we've got the Secretary of State in Maine. Okay, and I'm not even sure it's an elected position or whether it's an appointed position. She says, I don't like Trump. I'm going to take him off the ballot. I went, what? What exactly gives you the right to do that? I don't like Trump. Oh, okay. Well, if you don't like Trump, it's okay then. We're in this bizarre situation. We have never had so many criminal charges and fraud charges brought against a presidential candidate as against Donald Trump. And he just kicked everybody's butt in Iowa. And what happens every time they bring more charges?
He becomes more popular every time.
And people donate more money. Okay. I mean, I would think by now the Democrats would learn, if they had any sense whatsoever, they would make Donald Trump their candidate.
That's a that's a pivot. That's a good strategy right there, Bob.
The idea of kicking him, let's kick him so more people will donate to him. God, why didn't I think of that? That's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to wrap my head around that one, let me tell you. Okay, so we can't predict what the 2024 election is A, going to even turn out to be, or B, what effects that will have on the markets. I wanted to ask one last quick question about BRICS, because you did mention it earlier. There was a bunch of news that came out about BRICS at their last meeting back in September or October, I can't recall. Is this alliance something we need to be paying much closer attention to? There seems to be a growing list of countries that want to jump on board. Like, how real is BRICS? Like, what impact does this have?
A really interesting question. And the real good answer is, think of BRICS as the anti-debt-based system.
Right.
Every financial guy that I know that ever passed Economics 101, and there's about 4 people that I know who passed it, every single one of them knows the debt-based system is going to crash. We've got $305 trillion in the world, okay, in debt. The United States has $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities. We got a financial system that it's a corpse that is being held aloft with helium. And helium, of course, is in short supply. So when you run out of helium, you're kind of, okay, the corpse is going to hit the ground. We don't know when the crash is going to happen, but the smartest guys that I know say this is going to be the biggest in history. This will be bigger than 2008, bigger than 1929. This is going to be the big kahooey. I argue that's a good thing. And Paul Craig Roberts just came out with a piece 2 days ago. I would highly encourage people to go read. And he said the best thing that could happen right now is a total collapse, because we've got so much corruption, okay, and fraud, and the entire system is illegitimate, and we need to have it crash so we can rebuild it. But we've got the FBI and the DOJ deciding who the president should be.
Another sobering conclusion to our conversation, Bob. But do you have a high note to leave us on?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're in Cayman right now.
I am.
Okay. When you have warning of Category 5 hurricane coming, and you prepare for it as best you can, and it hits the island, okay, and then moves up to North Carolina. They like to move to North Carolina for some reason. They like North Carolina. What happens a week after the hurricane?
Well, I haven't been here for one, but I presume that you help your neighbors and your community get back on their feet and start putting the pieces back together.
Okay. Even the worst hurricanes, okay. There have been thousands of financial collapses in history. The mere fact that this is going to be the biggest, no particular big deal. You got the solution on the wall behind you. Okay. If we went to honest money, okay, and people think I'm a gold bug. I'm not a gold bug. I'm an honest money kind of guy. Can salt be money?
I mean, if people put value on it, absolutely.
Can shells be money?
Sure.
Can big round rocks with holes in the middle, can they be money?
If people find value in it.
You just nailed the most important element. Money is anything that two people agree is money. And it's money right up until one of them says, wait a minute, big round rocks? You kidding me? How do you carry the damn things around? Well, just give me some of those shells, okay? And believe it or not, people do that. We are going to have a change in the world's financial system, and the BRICS no more martinis for me. The BRICS countries recognize they get the short end of the stick, and they would like to start getting paid real money, and they would like to stop people cramming loans down their throat that they can't afford. The whole purpose of a debt-based system is to transfer all of the assets into the hands of the oligarchs. And something that I think that anybody listening to this should immediately recognize: the disparity in wealth between the truly rich now and everybody else is patently absurd. We've got the greatest dichotomy between rich and poor we've ever had. I mean, does Jeff Bezos really need $100 billion, or Bill Gates, he need $100 billion? How do you spend the money? I mean, it's enough work trying to count it. How do you spend it? The answer is you can't spend it.
No arguments here. Listen, Bob, it's been fascinating. Oh, sorry. You go ahead, Mark.
We've got to get to Mars, Bob. That's how you spend it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
There you go. Bob, listen, it was really great to have you back on again. I know that we're definitely going to do this again in short order. You've got one more for us.
No, I need to go down the list, okay, because my message is absolutely clear. We are going to see more chaos in the next 6 months to a year than it's ever occurred in history. I'll just go through the list real quick. First, Topic 1, pipeline. Who did it? The U.S. did it. Topic 2, Germany's economy collapsing because of sanctions they adopted. Germany is the economic driver for the EU. Okay, so when Germany goes, the EU goes. 3, position on Joe Biden corruption all his career. Joe Biden is a grifter. He's always been a grifter. He lies about everything. It looks like he's taken about $50 million in bribes through his son. 4, position on Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, it's a real piece of work, and very few people know this, but the guy that was behind the federal minimum mandatory drug laws, okay, if you got caught with 5 grams of cocaine, you might get 10 years mandatory in federal prison, was actually Joe Biden. And Joe Biden was significant because 2 out of his 3 kids were drug addicts. And Hunter Biden, I will say, is easily the biggest piece of shit that I've ever seen in my life. There is nothing redeeming about that fool. However, Joe Biden says Hunter Biden is the smartest guy he knows. If Hunter Biden is the smartest guy you know, you need new friends. Maine Secretary of State takes Trump off the ballot with no legal basis. That's going to be fun. Okay, this is not the Biden administration. This is actually the 3rd Obama administration. Joe Biden's not running this administration. The neocons and the people who were working for Obama are. 7, civil war in the United States that's coming. Clearly, there's a lot of anger in the United States, and people are waking up to the fact, even in the woke big cities, that we cannot afford to have 28 million illegal immigrants. 8, Americans are lied to about everything. 9/11, subprime, 2008 crisis, COVID, Gaza. We're to the point now, and I can't quite think of who the CIA director was, but the CIA director, I think in 1969, said the CIA would know they'd succeeded when everything Americans believed was a lie. We're there. 9, crimes against humanity and war crimes in Gaza by Israel. And that's really important. South Africa just took Israel to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, and did an incredible job of proving that there are war crimes and crimes against humanity taking place in Gaza. If the ICJ does not agree that it's genocide, it means anybody can do anything they want to forever in the future. So the ICJ literally has a gun at their head. They either figure out it's genocide or everybody gets to create genocide. 10, what happens when Hezbollah enters the fray? And they're going to. Okay. 11, who's winning in Gaza? Israeli newspapers report far more casualties than the IDF is reporting. 12, the missile and rocket attacks in Yemen guarantee broken supply chains, higher interest rates, and inflation. 13, Israeli economy is collapsing. Even though AIPAC controls the U.S. foreign policy, the United States could pull the plug and end the war in one day. 14, somebody is trying very hard to start World War III. The Brits are talking about a security arrangement with Ukraine that would pledge UK troops to fight in Ukraine. The UK has about 75,000 soldiers in their army, and they couldn't fill a soccer stadium. 15, everybody's going to like this. I put the odds at 50-50 that Secretary Austin was killed in Ukraine weeks ago. I'm going to go back a little bit. In 1967, I got sent through Army Intelligence School. I think it was a 13-week course, something like that. And the instructor stood up at the beginning and he said, okay, I'm going to spend 13 weeks hammering the same thing home. Open your eyes, learn to think for yourself, and pay attention to what you see, because everybody is lying to you. Now then, if Secretary Austin was in the hospital, okay, how come we haven't seen any pictures? How come we haven't seen any interviews? How come no doctor has come out and said, well, you know, we were afraid for him? I think the Russians killed him, and there are reports from Russia saying that Austin was killed in a rocket attack in Ukraine. The United States, frankly, doesn't know what to do. They don't know what the reaction is, because frankly, I don't know. You know, what do you do when you send your Secretary of Defense over in a war that you started and the other guys kill him? What do you do to him? That's going to be a really interesting question. If he shows up dead a week or two, he was actually dead 3 weeks ago. Okay. 16, Bill Gates funds 88% of the WHO budget. It's not a government agency. It's private. The WHO rammed through a plan where the WHO takes over world governance in the case of a pandemic that they announced. That plan was approved by the G20. Okay, 17, will there be a 2024 election in the US? You're assuming there's going to be election. Okay. Douglas McGregor said, no, there's not going to be election. Why would there be election? Okay. 18, potential for a civil war in the United States as a result of Democrats' efforts to stop Trump. Maine Secretary of State just dropped him from the ballot. Okay, of course, we've covered that in the past. Someone wants to start a civil war. I don't know who it is. I don't see anybody speculating. Somewhere between 7 and 10 million illegal immigrants have crossed the border, providing a serious risk to U.S. security. And here's the question everybody should be asking, and nobody is. Remember that she swimmer, the 6'4" guy who decided he really wanted to be a girl?
Vaguely, yes.
Okay. There are better swimmers than him. You know who they are?
Tell me.
Haitians. Okay. Believe me. Okay. That guy could not swim from Haiti to Mexico, but tens of thousands of Haitians have. Now that's absolutely amazing. I don't know. Do you put yourself in for a record? Do you have to wear a girl's swimsuit? Okay. But the strange thing is there's a lot of Haitians, there's a lot of Chinese, a lot of North Africans. And if there were a fifth column that someone is trying to set up to destroy the United States, that's how I would do it.
I think out of all this, I've come to realize that we need a Bob Moriarty show on SWP. Maybe it's like a once monthly show where you just come on and you run the whole thing, because you've got a lot to talk about, and I regret that we weren't able to get kind of more in depth on some of those points. But we will have you back to delve further into those. Maybe we'll do it a chunk at a time. But yeah, as it stands right now, we're likely to break this podcast into a couple different episodes itself. But Bob, we're definitely very appreciative of your time. We'll definitely have you back on again soon. Again, thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm glad to put this on the record, because what I will say is I can guarantee, and if anybody guarantees you anything financially, he's lying. However, I can guarantee many of the things that I've said are going to turn out to be very important. And we're in the most chaotic period in history. And frankly, if people haven't prepared their financial future for bad things happening, this would be a real good time to sit down and get your paper and pen out and figure out where you stand financially, because we are in the most dangerous time I've ever seen.
And that is a phenomenal way to end. I think that is like the soundbite that really encapsulates everything that you were just talking about. Thank you very much to Bob Moriarty for joining us once again. Always a fascinating conversation. As always, we like to wrap up our show with a segment we like to call Bullion Basics with Mark Yaxley. Mark, what do you got for us today?
Well, Jeremy, Bob certainly didn't disappoint today. He brought the fire once again, and I'm happy that you asked him about Bitcoin. And today's Bullion Basics segment might be a little bit contrary to Bob's opinion, but here, I'm going to throw it at you anyway. So with Bitcoin being in the news recently due to the approval of Bitcoin ETFs in the United States, I thought it was a good time to touch base on the good old gold versus Bitcoin debate. So for many years, particularly during the early days of Bitcoin, there was a fierce PR battle happening between gold and Bitcoin. I recall a lot of mud being thrown across the fence from both sides in either direction by Bitcoin and gold loyalists alike. And some of that sentiment remains today. You only have to read one of Peter Schiff's Twitter posts or X posts and the subsequent comments to get a sense of the tension that exists between the two asset classes and their loyal supporters. So I think the fundamental problem with the gold versus Bitcoin debate is that people want them to be the same thing. Although they do share a couple of common traits, scarcity and divisibility, namely, in my opinion, their differences are clearly more substantial. One is digital, the other is a tangible physical asset. One is relatively new, whereas the other has been traded by humans for nearly 6,000 years. One is extremely volatile and can make you a small fortune in a relatively short amount of time, or result in losing a small fortune in a relatively short amount of time, whereas the other is very stable and predictable by nature. And if you look at the intraday charts, you'll see that they perform differently from one another under the same market conditions. So whenever I'm asked which is better, my answer is always the same. I own both. By doing so, I feel that I've truly diversified my investment portfolio, adding these two different asset classes to the rest of the assets that I own in that portfolio. Although my allocation to metal is larger, I enjoy the potential meteoric rise of my Bitcoin allocation. Let's face it, it's exciting, right? For me, Bitcoin is strictly a speculative investment, one that can help me create new wealth, whereas gold's primary function is to preserve the wealth that I already have. So that's this week's Bullion Basics segment. Jeremy, back to you.
Yeah, I would assume that that Bob would have something to say about that, but I think you make very good points on both sides of things. So thank you for that, Mark. Appreciate it, and it'll be interesting to see how the Bitcoin ETFs perform over the long haul. That is all for us today. Thank you to everyone watching. Thank you to ANCAP Radio for partnering with us. And of course, to our guest, Bob Moriarty, who will surely be back in a short while. Head on over to the Strategic Wealth Preservation YouTube channel for loads of educational content. Don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there. And if you are interested in learning more about precious metals investing, do send us an email at info@swpcayman.com, and a member of our staff will be happy to help you. Until next week, stay safe and happy investing.
Thank you for listening to Inside the Vault, the podcast that opens the door to precious metals. We hope you learned something new and enjoyed the show. See you next time on Inside the Vault with SWP.